Imagine this for a moment. If a soldier risks their life in a combat zone, saves dozens, and comes home scarred, why would their own country deny they were ever there? This book dives right into that question, telling the story of the forgotten veteran, the American woman who served in Vietnam. And today we're trying something a little different. We want you to discover a new, in-depth approach to book coverage with this extended summary. Unlike our previous review, which was a focused analysis, this is more of a comprehensive overview. We'll be tracing the intellectual roots, the key arguments, and the real-world impact of this story. Let us know if you find this format helpful. Your feedback is what will help us shape our future content.
The book is The Women by Kristin Hannah, published in 2024. It's historical fiction, and it just shot straight to #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. It follows a young woman named Frankie McGrath. She's a sheltered nurse from a military family. And her story, her service in Vietnam, her battle with trauma, the social stigma, it shines a light on the ignored role of American women in the war.
So our goal today is to really walk through Frankie's entire arc. We'll go from her affluent, very tradition-bound start in Southern California to the battlefield hospitals of Vietnam, and then to the difficult years of invisibility back home. But we'll do it without revealing the ultimate fate of her relationships or the major twists. We want to analyze why these events were so defining.
And just so you know, you are experiencing a unique two-host AI conversation powered by Google's Notebook LM for deeper, more dynamic book summaries.
Okay, so let's set the stage. To understand her journey, we have to start with where she came from. We meet Frankie in 1966. She's only 20, a nursing student on Coronado Island in Southern California. And it's not just a place. It's a gilded cage, really. Wealthy, status-conscious. Her entire life is basically planned out for her.
That environment is so crucial. It defines the rigid gender divide she's up against. Her father, Connor McGrath, is pure Navy tradition. For him, service is masculine. It's for men like her brother, Finley, and his friend, Rye Walsh. Frankie is expected to be decorative, to marry well. Anything more is, well, it's just not done.
It sounds completely stifling.
Yeah.
So what's the spark? What pushes her to break from all that tradition so radically?
It's personal, and it's incredibly painful. It's the loss of her brother, Finley. He was the one person who really saw her, who told her that women can be heroes too. When he deploys and is then killed in action, that idea becomes her mission. It's driven by grief and this profound need to prove herself, to prove him right.
And her parents. Their reaction is just fascinating. They're ashamed. She enlists in the Army Nurse Corps, and they don't see it as honorable. To them, it's not real military service like the men in their family.
Exactly. And that dismissal from her own parents is really a preview of the much larger denial she's going to face from the entire country later on. The book makes it clear that for women like Frankie, the fight for recognition didn't start in Vietnam. It started right there, in their own homes.
So she trades that privilege for the chaos of war. The culture shock must have been absolute. What's it like when she first arrives?
It's an immediate, total immersion. The heat is oppressive, but the sound, it's the constant maddening noise of helicopters. That sound means more wounded are coming, that the danger is right there. She's thrown directly into triage, into surgery, in hospitals, just behind the front lines. The work is relentless.
So with the official military structure basically ignoring the women's role, where does she find any kind of stability?
She has to build it herself. And this is where the book introduces the Hooch family, which is such a powerful theme. She bonds with her bunkmates, Ethel and Barb. Ethel is the nurturing, practical one. Barb is outspoken, sharp, and fiercely loyal.
So they become her real unit.
They become her lifeline. This chosen family isn't just for morale. It's a necessary support system created because the official military one failed them. They rely on each other to survive the air raids, the long shifts, the psychological toll.
And in the middle of all this trauma, she finds a connection with a surgeon, Dr. Jamie Callahan. It's complicated, he's married, but it sounds like it's built on something deeper than romance.
It's really more of a trauma bond. They're working side by side in the most intense circumstances imaginable, saving lives. The book is very direct about the medical horrors they face, amputations, terrible burns, napalm injuries. Frankie becomes an incredibly competent nurse under this pressure, but you can see her psychological resilience just eroding. The main coping mechanism for everyone is alcohol and just walling off emotions to get through the next wave of casualties.
And that wall is put to the test when she loses Jamie.
Precisely. His helicopter is attacked and he's severely injured. Frankie's the one who has to treat him, to work on the man she loves. She puts this little talisman they shared, a rock mark you fight and McGrath, with his belongings as he's evacuated. but he's presumed dead after his heart stops during transport, and it just leaves her with this immense unresolved grief and guilt.
Her first tour ends around March of 1968, but she's a different person. She feels needed there.
She does, so she extends for a second tour. It feels like she's running from the emotional chaos of going home, and it's during the second tour that Rye Walsh, her brother's friend, finds her.
Rye tells her he's broken off his engagement. They start this passionate relationship, even take R&R in Hawaii. It's like a small bubble of normalcy.
It is. It's an anchor, connecting her present trauma back to her old life before the war. And speaking of important anchors, we want to pause briefly to mention Mindful Moments. That's our YouTube channel offering AI book analysis, summaries, and critiques. It's all about inspiring reflection and rational thought, and it's really valuable for aspiring authors. Now, as Frankie finishes her service, that connection with Rye is going to become incredibly complicated down the line.
So after multiple tours, she finally returns to the U.S. She's expecting, I don't know, at least some gratitude, but that's not what she gets.
No. The reality is brutal. Indifference, outright hostility from anti-war protesters. But the core problem is denial. The public, the institutions, they simply refuse to see her as a real veteran. Because she's a woman, because she was a nurse. Her service is just erased.
She tries to adapt, though. She gets a job in a civilian hospital, but she's struggling with what we now know as PTSD, the hypervigilance, the flashbacks.
And her combat skills become liabilities. She's actually fired after breaking protocol to save a patient. She acts with the urgency of a frontline medic, and the civilian world can't handle it.
And then the system fails her officially. She goes to the Veterans Administration.
And they turn her away. They deny her mental health benefits. They deny her medical benefits.
On what grounds?
They tell her she wasn't a combat veteran. They say her trauma is just nerves. I mean, it is profound institutional gaslighting. It reinforces this idea that her experience wasn't just difficult, but that it maybe never even happened.
And that denial is echoed by her own family. Back home, her father is ashamed of her trauma, her drinking. Her mother just retreats into denial.
It all comes to a head. The psychological collapse becomes physical after a huge confrontation with her father. She gets in her car, and there's a devastating crash.
That crash feels like the physical version of the emotional crash she'd been heading for since she got home.
It is. It's the point where an intervention becomes necessary, and the people who step in are the only ones who truly understand. Barb and Ethel.
Her hooch family.
Her hooch family saves her. They come get her, take her to Ethel's family horse farm in Virginia. It's a refuge, a space where she can just be, without judgment, away from the toxicity of Coronado.
And in Virginia, she slowly starts to find her voice. She starts nursing again, joins women's and veterans organizations. She begins to connect her personal pain to a larger political movement.
Right. And Barb, always the activist, pulls her into the anti-war movement. They even go to a major protest in Washington, D.C. It's a huge turning point for her.
And this is when she meets Henry Acevedo, an anti-war psychiatrist. He's the complete opposite of the VA system.
He is. He treats traumatized veterans with sympathy, with respect. He offers a modern way of understanding their pain. Their connection deepens, but then a family crisis calls her back home. Her mother has a stroke.
And this finally forces some kind of reconciliation with her father.
A partial one, yes. He softens. He offers her a house, which is his way of acknowledging her independence, even if he still can't really comprehend her service.
Back in California, her relationship with Henry gets serious. They get engaged. She becomes pregnant. It's this real moment of hope for a stable future.
She also gets heavily involved with a POW organization, which ties her personal story directly to the national story of the war's end.
But that involvement sets up the final, most shattering betrayal of all. During the repatriation of prisoners of war, she discovers something unthinkable. Rye Walsh is alive.
He's alive. And worse, she learns he has a wife and child. The relationship they had, the anchor she clung to in Vietnam, was based on a lie.
The shock is just unimaginable.
It's catastrophic. It contributes to her having a miscarriage, and her engagement to Henry ends. She completely spirals pills, alcohol leading to an overdose.
But that crisis is what finally breaks through the denial.
Yes. She enters a treatment facility, and there she finally gets the diagnosis she was denied for so many years, post-traumatic stress disorder. And that diagnosis is a validation, gives her pain a name. It allows her to finally begin to truly heal.
After treatment, she makes a radical change. She moves to Montana, buys a farmhouse, and creates something new out of her trauma.
She creates the last best place. It's a ranch, a sanctuary, dedicated to healing for other women who served in Vietnam.
And the story culminates around November 1982. Frankie goes to Washington, D.C. for the unveiling of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial.
It's this powerful public act of remembrance, a moment where the nation finally begins to acknowledge the service of all its veterans, including the women who were told they didn't count. What's so fascinating is how the book weaves it all together. Frankie's personal suffering, her trauma, her addiction, is directly connected to systemic failure and social injustice, to the erasure of women's history. It's such a powerful look at how the costs of war continue long after the fighting stops, especially when a nation refuses to see its own soldiers.
And the success of this book in 2024, nearly 60 years later, it just shows how resonant this story still is. Reviewers praised it for bringing this crucial, overlooked piece of history to the forefront of our collective memory.
And that connection the book makes between Frankie's personal healing and the national act of building the memorial, it leaves you with a really important question. Can a nation truly heal from a trauma until it recognizes and commemorates everyone who served, regardless of their gender or their role?
Click the link on screen for the in-depth book critique. Subscribe, share, purchase via the link, and think rationally.
See the many genre-based book podcasts at Mindful Moments. Subscribe and nourish your mind on the go.